around Hanukkah time. But with that said, and looking at the time, why don't we go ahead and start with Bahar, who will be, yeah, go ahead and I'm going to spotlight you so people can see your kitchen better. And I'm going to mute everyone except you. So, all right, go ahead.
Good. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you and cook with you. I'm a member of Temple Bethlehem. I joined a couple of years ago now with then my fiance, and we love the services, and we absolutely love Rabbi Clakefield, and we stayed and we became members, and it's been amazing to see all the great events that the temple and Leah put together, and I was excited to be part of this and cook with you all. So without further ado, a little about the dish that we're gonna cook tonight. This is a dish it's a Persian dish, but it's a Persian Jewish dish, and it's also, I'll take it one step further, it's a Persian Jewish dish from my hometown and my mom's family. Persian Jewish dishes are very unique to who's cooking it. So a lot of times families have their own version of the same dish. So Kebab Berenji, which not to be pronounced kebab, it's kebab, is in the Isfahani Judeo-Farsi dialect is the act of turning something into like a meatball. So technically in translation, this is a meatball dish, and berenj means rice. So it's a rice meatball dish. My family in Isfahan, where I actually was born and I grew up, loved using fresh herbs. And so when I cook, I use a lot of fresh herbs in general. They're always on my shopping list, regardless of what I'm planning on cooking for the week. But I love just getting fresh herbs and using them in my food. So if you are following the cooking with me right now, these are the ingredients that was in the handout. If you saw it in the email. So I'll start with the main one. We have 1 pound of ground beef. This is the, and I got, it could be fat-free, doesn't really matter. We have 1 cup of cilantro.
Are we supposed to be cooking at the same time you are?
You don't
have
to, but you can.
I haven't cut up my herbs yet.
I've prepared everything from before because otherwise it would take a while to wash and cut everything. So if you can't follow right now, I think the directions were in the email that went out. So you can always follow that. But basically,
we can also share the recording if you would like instructions.
Good idea.
So basically, what you want to do is wash and chop 1 cup of cilantro, 1 cup of parsley, and 1 cup of dill. This dish, when you start preparing for it and cooking it, your house smells amazing because all these fresh herbs it's the main part of the dish. So I have 1 cup of dill. And again, you could use dry dill or dry herbs also, but I highly recommend going with fresh ones because it smells amazing. And 1 cup of rice. I made a note for the rice not to be basmati rice. And the reason for that is that basmati rice grains tend to expand and get very large. And this is a meatball dish, so you don't want them to be poking out of the meatball. They taste fine, it just looks kind of funny with all the rice grains poking out of the meatball. So this is regular rice or non-basmati rice. You could get anything. and you just wash it. You don't need to soak it or anything. I'm just adding it to the mixture.
And I have a question for you real quick. And by the way, if anybody has questions, please send me a direct message and I'll make sure to ask Bahar. Can you substitute another herb for the dill?
So Persian cooking is actually all about compromising and substituting. But I would say every herb that goes in this dish is what gives it that aroma. I because I think it would completely change the aroma and the flavor of the meatball. If you don't like it, if you don't like the taste of dill, then just cut it up. And maybe add a little bit more of the other herbs. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, somebody said they don't have cilantro, but they do have extra dill and parsley. Which do you recommend?
Either one is okay.
Did you chop your vegetables, your herbs by hand, or do you put them in a?
You can put them in a food processor. I don't have a food processor, and I grew up chopping things by hand. They don't need to be super fine, but if you have a food processor, by all means, go ahead and use that because that's a lot faster and easier.
What mixture are you putting the rice in?
So that was the meat, the herbs, and the rice. So far, I'm just putting everything together. The last thing we want.
Bahar, if you put the herbs though in the food processor, they get a lot more mushier than if you cut them by hand.
That's
don't you
true.
think?
So you don't want to get them too finely chopped.
Okay. So you have the rice, the meat, and the herbs in there right now, right?
Yes.
And have you ever made it with chicken instead of beef?
Ground chicken? No, you don't want to make it with chicken. The smell of chicken doesn't go.
Why is that? Because I'm making it with half with chicken, half with beef. But why don't you recommend chicken?
The smell doesn't go well with this dish. And also, but if you already have them grounded mixed up, that's okay. But I personally don't recommend making it with chicken alone. Eventually, this is going to get cooked in tomato sauce.
Right.
And I don't think the mixture of all of the herbs with the chicken and the tomato sauce really go well together. I've never made it with chicken.
I'll let you know.
Did you put?
I know where you are.
Knowing you, it's gonna taste amazing.
Thank
Did
you.
you?
Thank you.
I missed that. Did you add the tarragon already?
No, I'm mixing it right now.
Oh, got it. Sorry.
Tarragon is the last thing that I have, and I couldn't find fresh tarragon. I have dry tarragon because I usually make extra dry herbs just to keep them. So I have dry tarragon, and so in the directions, I put 2 tablespoons. It could be like basically 3 stems of tarragon. It's one of those items that you don't want to miss out on. This is what really gives the dish its aroma. You don't want to put too much of it because it will make the dish a little bitter. Bitter, not better. So for the dry ones, I'm taking what would be equal to 2 tablespoons. Just enough to give it the smell that it needs to have.
I have a question. I'm curious, can I ask you, how do you dry your herbs? Do you just put them out and let them dry out?
Yeah, I wash them and then I just put them on a piece of clean fabric that I have for drying herbs, and I usually put it out on a table that I'm not using. You don't need to put it in the sun as long as it's laid out open. You just need to have a lot of patience because sometimes it takes, depending on what herb it is, it might take 3 weeks to completely dry. You don't want to take them even if they're slightly not, wet, because it will they will start to mold once you put them in a jar or in a bag. So you want to keep them as long as they need to be completely dry and then you just put them in a jar or in a bag that you might want to use. And you can keep them.
Is the rice you put in the bowl cooked?
Say that again?
Is the rice you put in the bowl cooked?
No, just washed. Yeah, just washed. Everything is going to cook together, so you don't need to cook the rice ahead of time. So the last thing we're going to add in terms of ingredients is the onion. One small onion. This is too big, so I'm only going to grind half of it. You don't want to grind these from before and leave them. I'm a little sensitive to onions. I usually keep them as the last ingredients I'm gonna add to the dish right before I start mixing them. And the reason for that is that onion attract bacteria, and that's one of the reasons they start smelling also. So you don't want to cut them and just let them sit out in the open for too long. So I'm gonna grind.
So I can't use frozen onion?
Say that again?
I have a frozen onion, chopped onion.
Fine.
That's fine?
Yeah. So while I grind this, if you have other questions, feel free to ask. And if I start crying, it's the onion.
Bahar, when you grew up in Isfahan, can you tell us more about that?
Sure. One thing to mention about the onion, if you have frozen onion, make sure it's not too soggy or there isn't much water in there. You kind of want to squeeze it out a little bit to take the water out.
Oh, too late.
So I actually, my whole family is from Isfahan, from both sides. And my parents got married right before the revolution. And they wanted to leave at that time, like everybody else. But because of some family situations, they couldn't leave. So they stayed and had me and my brother. And then when I was 2, they wanted to leave again because circumstances weren't too safe. Again, it didn't happen. That one is a longer story. And so we stayed until I was 16, and we finally were able to escape. So I grew up in Isfahan, went to school, and sorry, I knew this would happen. I think I'll stop. What's the onion now? And so yeah, it wasn't until we were able to actually get out safely in 2000. I was I think it was February of 2000, and then we moved to Austria. That's where we were allowed to escape to before we got visas to come to the US. All right, so now we have the grated onion. I'm just gonna take out some of the water. We don't want too much of the onion water in the mix, and I'm gonna add it to the mixture. Okay.
I'm making such a mess.
That's what good
Sorry,
chefs
Bahar,
do.
did you add the onion and the spices to everything already to the meat also?
I'm just adding the spices right now.
And the onion you added too?
Yes.
You don't pre-cook it, it's just raw onion, right?
Yep, everything is raw.
Try.
I get so emotional when I cook.
So the trick to not crying with onions is you put it in the freezer for 5 minutes before you have to cut it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then when you cut it, you won't cry.
Okay.
Wow.
Fun fact. Thank you, Renee.
Sounds good. For the spices, this is a dish that would appreciate a little bit more salt, not for the flavor, but so it doesn't fall apart. I think I put one teaspoon in the directions. I don't use measurements, so I kind of go by how much I feel is enough, but it's most likely going to be about 1 teaspoon. We don't really measure things in Persian cooking in terms of tablespoon or teaspoon. It's very visual for me at least. And pepper, you don't use it for spice. To make it spicy, you just add it for flavor. So as much or as little as you like. Black pepper, not red pepper. And again, it's all about the aroma. We don't use red peppers in Persian cooking because we don't have spicy food. And then turmeric, again, I think I put about 2 teaspoons. It's mainly for color. You don't want to put too much because it again makes the dish bitter. But enough of it adds a really good color to the meatballs. Now we have everything in the bowl. We're just gonna start mixing it. So you can get in there with your hands. And one thing you might notice, this is a lot of ingredients. This would be enough to feed a party of probably 7 people.
Bahar, one more question. Do you put salt in it even though kosher meat is so salty?
If your meat is very salty, I wouldn't, but I think my meat didn't have any salt in it.
No, but I'm saying kosher meat, just by virtue of being kosher, is saltier than like trace meat.
Yeah, I would still put a little bit because
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I cook with kosher meat and I've never felt like it had enough salt in it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So you just want to mix it really well because unlike other meatballs, this doesn't have a sticky ingredient in it like chickpea powder or breadcrumbs or eggs. So you kind of want to use the meat itself to get it to stick together. And if you're just cooking for yourself or for 2 to 4 people, I would go with 2/3 of the ingredients. Or you can always have leftovers, which is good. I love the smell of this dish. There are different versions of this in different cities. Like if you have friends, you've probably had gondi at their house. That's the Tehrani version, which has no herbs, no rice. The northern part of Iran make a sweet version of this, and they put dates and plums in it, which is also really good.
Oh, yeah.
There is another version of it that they make in the northeast of the country, and they put a whole hard-boiled egg in the middle of it. That's also pretty good.
So is this the version your family usually likes to cook, or do you cook several of them, or?
This is the version we all like. I actually haven't tried the other ones. I've just seen them like in cooking books and online, but I haven't had them. I've had gondi, and I think gondi is pretty good, but this is very special.
Can I see what your mixture looks like to see if I have the right proportions? Oh, okay. I probably don't have enough herbs.
It's
It's a lot of green.
It's a lot of grain, yeah. But once you cook it, all of that rice and meat is gonna expand, so it won't look this green. Okay, one thing that I should have done while I was mixing this, I should have started the sauce, but that will only take a minute. So let's switch to the sauce, and it's very easy because it's just a base to keep the meatballs in it so that they can cook in there. So in a pot, not too big, not too small, medium-sized pot, I put about 1 inch of boiled water. I boiled it from before so it would be ready. I think I put about I don't know how much I put in the directions, but you don't want too much water. This might actually be about 2 cups that I'm putting. You just want enough water in there so that most of your meatballs are in the water so they can cook in that sauce. 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, or half a can of tomato sauce. Tomato sauce. I like this tomato paste. It's a little on the sour side, and I like the flavor of it. This is the Tukas tomato paste. It's pretty dense and a little on the sour side. So I might actually not add too much salt to the sauce itself. I'll add a little bit of pepper. And just a little bit of salt, maybe about half a teaspoon. Okay, we're gonna mix them. We're gonna put it on the pot to boil for a minute.
Can I ask, why did you have to boil your water beforehand?
You don't have to. You just need to wait until it's boiling before you put the meatballs in there.
It's not about okay. Got it.
I knew I won't have enough time, so I boiled the water. So as soon as it comes to a little bit of boil, I know it's ready. So while that is boiling, we're just gonna take the meatballs and turn them into, round them up to, I'm gonna make them about 2-inch diameter. I know they're gonna expand, so I don't want them, they will probably be double the size once they're cooked, or maybe so about 2 inches, and you want to pack them pretty hard again because there's no ingredients there that by nature makes it very sticky, so you kind of want to pack it pretty tight so it doesn't fall apart. And this is probably going to give me about 20 meatballs as I see it, which is good because I have family coming over for Shabbat tomorrow night, so I know what I'm feeding them.
Bahar, you didn't put actual soup in it, right? You just put the tomato paste and the spices.
Yeah.
Right?
You could, yeah. And you could go with tomato sauce. It doesn't have to be paste. You just put a little bit more of it.
Because on the instruction where it says stir in tomato paste and broth.
It could just be water. It doesn't need to be broth.
Okay.
Is it better if it's broth?
It gives you a little bit more flavor, but there's already a lot of flavor in this dish, so you don't really need to add anything to it. And if you are using broth, I probably would only use vegetable broth. You really don't want too much flavor in there. Too much added flavor. So what I'm gonna do, once the sauce boils, I'm just gonna slowly place these in there, and it will take about half an hour or so for them to cook. So while we make ourselves some dessert, I'm gonna place these in the pot and I'll come back to you guys when they're ready.
And can I ask you, do you have the fire on medium, or it's not high anymore once it's boiled?
Right now it's high. Oh yeah, after it's boils and you put the meatballs in there, just medium is fine.
And you don't cover it?
You do cover it, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Well, we'll get back to you, Bahar. Now let's now go to the sweet side. And Yael, let me find you, and I'm gonna.
Hi.
There you go.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Yael, born and raised in Israel, and moved to the States 2 weeks after I got discharged from the Army when I was 20. That was 19 years ago. Lived in New York for 16 and something years, and then moved to the Bay Area about 3.5 years ago, and joined Kol Shafar very, very recently, less than a year ago. So actually we just joined when COVID hit, or a little bit before that. So got to experience the community in a different way, and have been charmed and fell in love with it. This is a super simple recipe by design. It's a recipe of my best friend, who's like a sister to me. Her grandparents used to own and run a very famous bakery in the very northern part of Israel. And they were known for these very complex, elaborate pastries that they used to make. But every Purim, as a tradition, since we were all very, very, very young, we all gathered in their home kitchen or in the bakery and used this recipe that by design was made super simple, with the simplest ingredients, because the message was that anyone should be able to make their own Hamantaschen, or in Hebrew we say oznei Haman, and it shouldn't be something that you should go out of your way to find special ingredients or work too hard for it. So it was a tradition. We used to make loads, like huge batches, and then deliver them. And once I had my own kids, ever since they're born, they know that every Purim we make our own Hamantaschen. And this year, this is such a simple recipe that this year my 5-year-old made his own batch. I was just looking, and yes, the kitchen was a complete disaster after that, but he made his own batch very successfully, and on his own. I was just watching. So we can start. We'll mix the dry ingredients first. So I think it was one cup of flour, and 1/3 cup of sugar. It's best to use the whitest sugar possible, but I couldn't, so mine is a little, brown sugar. And then a flat teaspoon of baking powder. Not too much, because this is not it's not a dough that is supposed to be rising too much. So we just mix those dry ingredients together, very, very simple. And then we move to the wet ingredients. So we'll just take one yolk. Just the yolk, and I just drop it in. And the butter. A lot of people love adding 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, which I love. It makes it great, but it's not necessarily part of the recipe. I like to cut the butter into little pieces like this, so it's easier to mix, easier to, especially for little ones, so it mixes better and faster. Do not microwave your butter because it completely ruins the texture of the dough. But it does need to be about 2-3 hours out of the fridge before you make the dough for best results. So room temperature and super, super soft. So just gonna mix it in. And now is the part where if you do have little ones, but also for grown-ups, super therapeutic. But now is the part where we just use our, go ahead.
Do you mind saying again how much butter? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, no worries. Half a cup. So
Okay,
if you have just a block, it's usually you cut it
in half.
In the middle, in half, and you just, for ease, you chop it up and you just mix it in. And now we're just gonna work with our hands and just make a mess and start creating the dough. Now, if after a while it's not getting doughy, it's too much crumbled, you start sprinkling water, but very, very sparsely. So we need to give it a little bit, we need to be patient with it and work with it, and not to add too much water. Otherwise, it makes the dough too soggy and too hard to work with. So I don't know if you're doing it with me, but mine is starting to shape up, but still a lot of crumbs still. Too dry and crumbling. So I am gonna drizzle a little bit of water in. We're not gonna do it today, but also before you start after the dough is ready and before you start working with it to actually make the shape, it's great to put the dough for like 20 minutes in the fridge. It makes it much easier. Again, especially if little ones are making it, it makes it much easier to create the shapes with. Okay, so mine is starting to look like a dough. I'm going to show you. It's very, very therapeutic after sitting all day in front of the computer and in Zoom meetings. This is great. Yeah, and for filling, you can get as creative as you want. Someone even told me, I was telling someone I'm going to be doing this, and they told me that they used much less sugar and actually made pizza Hamantaschen. So the filling for them was like tomato sauce and some cheese mix, and they said it came out great. Okay, so this is a good looking dough. I would say that I wasn't patient enough, and if I had to redo, I wouldn't add the sprinkles of water that I did. It's a little too much on the soft side. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna sprinkle a lot of flour when I'm gonna start working with it. So let's give it a little bit more time. At this point, we should be turning on the oven at 356-ish and lining a baking sheet over a pan, and no need to grease. There's loads of butter in here, as you can see.
Can I ask
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Is the dough different than like a challah dough?
Oh yeah, very different.
Okay.
Very different, and yeah. So challah would usually, I mean, you can make challah without eggs, but would have more eggs. But the key difference is really the yeast. So this dough does not have yeast, and challah dough must have yeast. So I'm gonna work with a smaller piece. Yeah. Also, challah would have less sugar usually. So yeah, it's definitely, and it's not gonna taste the same at all when you make it. It's not even reminiscent
Oh, no wonder my Hamantaschen's never get eaten at my house.
You're making them with the, yeah, no, it's very, very different dough. Also, I've never heard of a challah dough. I mean, you know, every person has their own recipe, but I've never heard of butter in challah. So,
No, it's part.
Yeah. Okay, couldn't find my rolling pin, so I'm just gonna use this, but please be generous with flour when you're rolling this, because this it's by nature it's a sticky dough. But here we are, we have our dough. It's I like it pretty thin, but again, for little ones it's usually more challenging to work with thin dough, especially when we need to put the filling in and so on. But once you have, I'm gonna move the screen so you can see. Once you have the dough ready, we can take any, you know, a cookie cutter, just a regular cup, and we just create just the simplest circle. And that's usually a part that they love. And once we have a circle, we can start. So usually I'll make a bunch of circles ready, and you kind of create an assembly line for all the toppings, or all the fillings that you're planning to use. And be careful, because it's a very gentle dough. And so once you have your circles ready, you start filling them. So I'm going to use Nutella, if I can open it. Oh, okay. Greasy hands. Okay, here we go.
There you go.
Okay, so Nutella is the biggest hit in our household. Although I'm a big fan of dates and nut mixture. Any jams would work. Also halva, if you're familiar, is a great idea. So we put almost, you know, this is almost too much. A half of a teaspoon in the middle of each circle. So, and again, some people, like in Israel, if the filling is not spilling out of the Hamantaschen, it's not a real Hamantaschen. But some people, you know, like it more concealed, like a surprise in the middle of the Hamantaschen. So it's, you know, you have to play with it, but this is kind of the amount, the optimal amount is a half a teaspoon of filling. The more watery the filling is, the more challenging it will be to maintain the Hamantaschen shape while baking. So just FYI. Now, to create the Hamantaschen shape, we just create the top of a triangle and pinch it together like this. And then you can already see how you get the, you know, the traditional Hamantaschen shape.
Very nice.
Okay, now if your dough is crumbly, mine is a little bit crumbly, what you do is just a little bit of water, you dip your finger and you go over the edges and pinch with just a tiny little bit of water to prevent it from opening while baking. So if you see little openings before it goes into the oven, it means while baking, it will open up and probably lose its shape. So I always like to just go over with the tip of my finger and just pat it and make sure everything is kind of sealed. So we're gonna make another one. I'm gonna put this right here. And I'm gonna make another one. So we take the top, we create a triangle shape, the very top, and then we pinch the other two sides and we get the Hamantaschen shape. Go over with some water to glue the dough and make sure it doesn't open. And that's it. So that's it. I'm gonna make a third one, and then we can go back to the Bahar unless there are any questions.
So what are some other flavors that people often add?
So the most popular one in Israel, like when I grew up, Nutella was not a thing. You put in a Hamantaschen. It was poppy. So there's a poppy mixture. You mix poppy with either a lot of honey and vanilla extract, or I can't quite remember the actual mix, but it's a poppy based mixture, and that's by far the most popular filling for a Hamantaschen in Israel. But that being said, there's a lot of as I said, date mixes with nuts, or apricot jelly with nuts. Walnuts go really well inside. So you can really get creative and put whatever it is you like. Usually we make 2-3 types of jams, but the most popular in my house is by far Nutella. Sometimes you can just even put a mixture of chocolate chips, like the mini chocolate chips, with a little bit of nuts, or even without, and that also usually goes very well.
So I've just been baking along with you, Yael, and it's I just finished. I do chocolate chips usually and jam. I never really liked the poppy, so I can.
Pretty.
Good.
Nice.
Of course, I hope they don't open up, like you said. Do you ever do an egg wash on them? Do people ever do that?
Some people do that. I don't usually. So when they come out of the oven, so you can absolutely do that. Then it's a preference. I heard someone doing.
I do egg wash.
You do egg wash? Okay,
I do egg wash, yeah.
Is that just for it to look pretty, or what's the?
It just makes it a little bit more browner, and the color is a little more shinier.
Right.
Yeah, and for vegans, I heard someone doing 2
And it's a good job for little kids.
Yes. You can do also 2 tablespoons of hot water with a tablespoon of maple, and also brush it if you're vegan. So basically, you put this in the oven for 10 to 15 minutes. I think that's what I wrote in the recipe. I'm not sure, but you don't. My biggest mistakes usually is waiting for them to crisp. Don't do that. It's just when you're noticing just the edges starting to become golden, that's when you take them out and let them rest a little bit. Don't wait until they're crisp, because then 2 hours later they're going to be very hard. And then once they cool off, we just sprinkle powdered sugar all over them. And that's it. It's super easy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yael. This was great, and you're a great instructor. Especially, I'm there with Natalie. I'm not the best cook, but you were very easy to follow. But is there any other questions? And if not, we're gonna turn back to Bahar and for the final
Have
steps.
you ever frozen your ozneman?
Yes, I did. There's no problem. It goes well.
Okay.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Yael.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Bahar, are you ready to?
I'm ready. The food is not ready, but I'm ready.
Okay.
Yael, can you ship a few of those here?
Yes.
So one thing I forgot to mention is when you put the tomato paste in the pot with water to boil and a little bit of salt and pepper, you want to add 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil. I forgot to mention that. But if you if you're cooking now and you didn't see that note coming from Leah, it's not too late. Just add the oil and it will be fine. So I'll show you what it looks like now. I ended up getting about 20 meatballs in there, so it's pretty jam-packed. The water doesn't need to cover everything. As long as it's just sitting in there, you're fine. I had to add a little bit more water because I didn't realize I had so many meatballs and I took a small pot. So I usually put them all at the bottom. So 1 inch of water is usually enough. But if you have layers of meatballs, you kind of, which I don't recommend it, try to get a bigger pot so everything is sitting at the bottom. But if you have to put a few on top like I had, just bring the water up to halfway in the upper layer or the base of the upper layer. You just want them to be sitting in the water while they're cooking, but it doesn't, the water is just the base for it to cook in. It doesn't need to cover everything. So this should probably take another, the way it's going, another 20 minutes or so before it's completely cooked. So I would say from the time you put the meatballs in the sauce until they're cooked, it's at least half an hour. And you want the sauce to be boiling. And then you will see, once they're ready, the color changes, the meatballs, you see the rice being expanded, the meat changes color. You can tell when it's done. And if you are not familiar with the color, you know, the first time might not be as clear, you can just take one bite and see if it needs to cook more. You want to keep an eye on the sauce for it not to burn out. You always want to have a little bit of sauce at the bottom. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope if you make it, it's delicious and you like it.
Well, how do you serve it?
So we usually put all of it in a big flat dish. And if it's too saucy, you know, a dish that you can also pour the sauce in, because the sauce itself is also delicious. And you just eat it by itself. We eat it with Israeli salad. Usually it tastes good with Israeli salad or a simple salad with just a few ingredients. But we don't eat it with any other base like rice or anything. It's good on its own because it has everything in it.
Okay.
It goes well with Israeli salad.
And Hamantaschen for dessert.
Ah,
yes.
Awesome. Well, I just want to take a moment to thank Sarah Glass and Yael and Bahar. I reached out to Sarah with kind of a random request and sharing this program we're doing, and they hopped on and said yes and took a chance. So thank you, Yael and Bahar, for always being enthusiastic and participating. They put time into this. We had meetings on it. They, you know, typed out all the ingredients. And so thank you so much. You both are great instructors.
Thank you to Leah for organizing this stuff all the time.
My pleasure.
Oh, Leah.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Well,
Tell your friends about the group.
yes. Oh, by the way, anybody's welcome to join again. You know, if you know, even if you're not a TBA member, and pass it along to friends, please send me a direct message right now and I'll be sure to include you in the future. Our next program is going to be on a Sunday, actually, on the 21st of March. It's sugar and spice and everything Passover, and we're going to learn to cook chopped and fried gefilte fish balls, which is a English tradition.